It is October 16th, 2020. I'm continuing my reading of my Pedigree of the Phoenix website, which is preserved by the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine. I won't go into any further ado, I'll just start reading. Another reference in a book on Masonic symbolism led me to John L. Stevens' book, Incidents of Travel in Central America and Yucatan, in which he described his discovery of what he considers to be a version of the winged sun disk symbol in a Mayan ruin at Ocosingo near Palenque. In the back wall of the center chamber was a doorway of the same size with that in front, which led to an apartment without any partitions. But in the center was an oblong enclosure 18 feet by 11, which was manifestly intended as the most important part of the edifice. The door was choked up with ruins to within a few feet of the top, but over it, and extending along the whole front of the structure, was a large stucco ornament, which at first impressed us most forcibly by its striking resemblance to the winged globe over the doors of Egyptian temples. Part of this ornament had fallen down, and striking the heap of rubbish underneath, had rolled beyond the door of entrance. We endeavored to roll it back and restore it to its place, but it proved too heavy for the strength of 4 men and a boy. The part that remains is represented in the engraving and differs in detail from the winged globe. The wings are reversed. There is a fragment of a circular ornament which may have been intended for a globe, and there is no remains of serpents entwining it. Let's move down here. Okay, so here we see, so this is a typical Egyptian winged sun symbol. I think this may be the one that's being spoken about, and then this again is the Mayan one at Tikal. Unfortunately, the Mayan version of the ubiquitous winged sun symbol was found by John L. Stevens at Ocosingo near Palenque. So maybe this is not necessarily the same symbol, but they would be similar. Unfortunately, I don't have that image. Strangely enough, in Forgotten Gods, K. Herman Bowman devotes a whole chapter to the mystical marriage of the serpent and the bird, and he identifies both the Ocosingo winged disc and the serpent bird motif from Tikal as composite serpent bird symbols. Again, I will quote a source quite extensively. The history of the ancient Toltecs in Mexico is associated with the tradition of a great deity, god of the sky, called Quetzalcoatl, partly a nature god, partly a culture hero. He taught the people agriculture, picture writing, and gave them the calendar. His name means feathered serpent or plumed serpent, and that is why the ancient Mexicans are called the people of the serpent. There are some remarkable parallels to be observed between ancient Egypt and ancient Mexico. The transubstantiation of the serpent bird symbol into a living being, a mystical ruler, is one of them. In Egypt, Horus Osiris, the original painted symbol, developed into a culture hero and man god. The winged snake became in Roman times a symbol attributed to Mercury, god of merchants. In his staff, caduceus, consisting of 2 serpents twisting round a staff with 2 wings at the top. This is, however, not the only offshoot resulting from the union of the serpent and the bird. This ancient life-giving symbol developed in the course of time into more complicated emblems, and it is one of the wonders of this mystical marriage that it undoubtedly stimulated man's artistic genius, and that from this real art arose. I'm just going to read that one more time because I didn't read it very well. This is, however, not the only offshoot resulting from the union of the serpent and the bird. This ancient life-giving symbol developed in the course of time into more complicated emblems, and it is one of the wonders of this mystical marriage that it undoubtedly stimulated man's artistic genius, and that from this real art arose. This is actually an important phrase, but I'm going to continue on here. A few examples may be given here. A typical ornament in Egyptian architecture is the winged disc, symbolizing the sun or sky god, consisting of the sun disk, falcon's wings, and a couple of cobras. Almost the same ornament is to be found on the lintels above the entrance of Maya temples in Central America. Though convention and tradition have changed the details of these designs, and simplification and atrophy have also done their work, the essential characteristics of the snake, head and tail, and the bird, wings, are nevertheless plainly recognizable. This ornament has made its way all over the globe, and in some form or another we can trace it with all kinds of variations and under many disguises in the decorative art of many nations and races. Again, this is quite important. Essentially what it comes down to is the serpent part of this is the imagined serpent that eats the sun. Many cultures believed in a sun-eating eclipse serpent. So that was a common solar eclipse myth found in all kinds of different cultures. And then you have the bird appearance in the sun's corona. So here you have the serpent that eats the sun, that concept, and then you have the bird that always defeats the serpent, because when totality is reached and the sun's totally eclipsed, then during some eclipses, as I said, not all of them, but a certain number of eclipses, you get this bird pattern appearing in the sun's corona during totality. And then totality ends and the sun slowly reemerges from behind the moon. So the sun, having been eaten by the sun-eating eclipse serpent, is miraculously revived after the bird, seen during totality, essentially wins a battle against the sun-eating eclipse serpent. That's essentially where the Horus myth comes from, and very similar myths in other cultures. The whole serpent-bird dichotomy, as it were, and how they're together in these myths is essentially explained by this. A few examples may be given here. A typical ornament in Egyptian architecture is the winged disc, symbolizing the sun or sky god, consisting of the disc, falcon wings, and a couple of cobras. Okay, so I think I already read that. Let's see. Yeah, so let's continue down here. I accidentally, whoops. Let's try to get this right. This is very off the cuff. Herman Bowman's Figure 27 from Forgotten Gods compares the Okasingo and Tikal serpent bird symbols to the ancient Egyptian winged disc symbol, and in it he clearly indicates where, in his opinion, the head and or tail of the serpent appears in them. It is noteworthy that Bowman refers to the fusion of the serpent and bird in this ancient and apparently ubiquitous solar symbol as a mystical marriage, since it is the mystical marriage of the Earth's sun and only moon during the total solar eclipse which originally inspired it. It is easy to understand how these two elements, serpent and bird, are so intimately interwoven in the symbolism of the total solar eclipse. So I will just quickly interject here that another common eclipse myth is that it's the sun and the moon making love during an eclipse or having sexual intercourse. Perhaps one of the best ones I can think of is the myth of Zeus ravishing Leda in the form of a swan. You can be quite sure that this myth of the sun god Zeus ravishing Leda, and in some versions Nemesis, it arises from this. The total eclipsed sun with the white corona in a bird shape around it looks a lot like a swan. So I think we can be pretty sure that the myth of Zeus ravishing Leda, or Nemesis, is a myth about the sun in swan form ravishing the moon goddess, as it were. It's the sun and the moon having sexual intercourse during a solar eclipse. Even if that's not the case, there are other eclipse myths where it's very obvious that the concept is that the sun and the moon are making love or having less than consensual sexual intercourse, as it were. Herman Bowman's Figure 27 from Forgotten Gods compares the Okasingo and Tikal serpent bird symbols to the ancient... Okay, I read that already. What's going on here? This is getting a little messy, sorry about that. The serpent was a creature that the ancient people associated with solar eclipses for a variety of reasons, but perhaps the most universal reason for the snake to be associated with eclipses of the sun is that, because of the unique ability to dislocate its jawbone, it is one of the few creatures which is capable of swallowing another creature considerably larger than itself. Thus it was perfectly logical for our ancient ancestors to assume that a gigantic cosmic snake was swallowing the sun during a solar eclipse. As a respected American archaeoastronomer, Dr. Anthony Avini, describing the stone reliefs that are carved into the facade of the temple of the plumed serpents at Xochicalco in ancient sky watchers of Mexico, writes, "The astronomically related relief decorations on this temple add to its distinction from surrounding structures. Here we see serpents swallowing the sun disk, an allusion to eclipses." So Dr. Anthony Avini is clearly identifying these reliefs at the Xochicalco as depicting the myth of the serpent swallowing the sun in an eclipse. I'm getting annoyed here. I'm just using my pad here, not a mouse. So it is known that our ancient ancestors imagined a gigantic cosmic serpent was gradually swallowing the sun during a solar eclipse. This would have instilled an awful dread and even terror in them. When, at totality, this cosmic serpent had completely devoured the sun, and all seemed to be lost, with what they perceived to be a gaping black hole, or perhaps blackened burnt-out ember, replacing the luminous disk of the sun in the sky, a radiant cosmic bird would suddenly burst into view surrounding the black disk in the sky, and to those observing this calamitous cosmic event in awe and terror, it might appear to be attacking the cosmic serpent who had just completely swallowed the sun. After several suspenseful minutes, which might have seemed to last for hours to the bewildered or even terrified observers of the solar eclipse, this ethereal cosmic bird of prey would vanish every bit as suddenly. It would vanish. It would vanquish too, but I wrote vanish. This is about it disappearing when totality ended. So, but it vanquishes the serpent every time. So, this ethereal cosmic bird of prey would vanish every bit as suddenly as it had flashed into existence. But at the very same moment, the sun would be seen to be emerging from the hole in the sky, and after several more highly suspenseful minutes, the refulgent orb of the sun would be completely restored to life and would continue in its regal daily course across the sky. Getting a little flowery in my language there, I must admit. How are we doing for time here? Oh, still got almost 7 minutes left. So we'll continue on. E.G. Squires referred to Stephen's discovery in his book The Serpent Symbol, in which he wrote, "But while conceding that the hierogram, i.e. winged disc symbol, is elusive to the supreme deity of the Egyptians, I am convinced that there is a deeper significance concealed beneath it than has yet been explained, and that a further study of the primitive religions of the East will yet throw much new light upon its meaning. This sacred compound emblem was not peculiar to Egypt, but is to be found through ancient Assyria and in a modified form on the Persian temples. The monuments discovered by Mr. Layard in what is supposed to be ancient Nineveh are fruitful in representations of this symbol, which is regarded by that author as in some way elusive to the sun and its powers. Among the numerous interesting monuments discovered by Mr. Stevens in Central America and Mexico, there are one or two which bear an apparent representation of the same, i.e. winged disc symbol. It is proper to observe that the accompanying engraving is in part a restoration of the original, which is broken. It is of stucco and occurs over the doorway of an ancient temple at Ocosingo, Mexico. It differs from the sacred hierogram of the East in having no serpent surrounding the globe in the center, but from its position and well-attested fact that all the ornaments of the Mexican and Central American temples had some significance, we are justified in ascribing to it a symbolical purport. Comte d'Alviela, referring to page 490 of an article in volume 11 of the Revue Archéologique 1865, mentions that a certain Mr. Dijktal thought he discovered in the ruins of the sanctuary at Alcazingo near Palenque a fragment of the wing of a globe sculptured above a doorway. Although I am unable to confirm that this refers to the same winged globe as that found by Mr. Stevens, it must be considered to be quite probable. A restoration drawing, come on, I should be using a proper mouse, I guess. Oh dear, I lost my place. Yeah, come down here. Sorry about that. Yeah, not quite. Sorry about this mess up. So here we are. So a restoration drawing done by Tatiana Proskuriakov of the Temple of the Cross at Palenque, figure 152 in Joseph Campbell's The Mythic Image, depicts the entrance to the sanctuary which houses the famous stone relief of the foliated cross. A somewhat menacing bird-like being with outspread wings that is similar to the Ocasingo winged sun adorns the ornately carved lintel, seemingly guarding the entrance to the sanctuary. Once again, the placement of this figure on the lintel over the entrance to the temple sanctuary is eerily reminiscent of the ancient Egyptian winged sun disk reliefs which adorn the lintels of the famous temple dedicated to the solar falcon god Horus at Edfu, and in fact most other, or many other, Egyptian temples. So unfortunately, Tatiana Proskuriak's drawing of the Mayan serpent bird gracing a lintel at the Temple of the Cross at Palenque is not available in the archive site here. A lot of the images aren't available. I'm just going to check the time, make sure how we're doing here. A couple of minutes left. I am convinced that the profound religious significance of these two ancient symbols of the sun god is virtually identical, even though they are separated geographically by a distance of around 3,000 miles, much of which consists of a vast and forbidding ocean, and they are separated in time by almost as many years. Both of these symbols clearly derive from the same ultimate source, the total eclipse of the sun, and thus they may be clearly understood to embody and convey the various religious concepts which have arisen out of this awe-inspiring celestial phenomenon. I will add that later versions of the Egyptian sun symbol, they existed and were continuing to be created. I would say even into after Jesus. I think I'd have to verify that, but certainly, the time gap of the later versions of the Egyptian winged sun symbols to the early versions of the Mayan ones is not 3,000 years, but if you take the earliest Egyptian depictions starting at about 2500 BC, 3000 BC, and then compare them to the Mayan ones in the mid 500s or so, there is a significant difference in time. Another Mayan use of the winged sun disk symbol, which clearly reflects the ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian usage of the symbol, is the Sun God Pectoral Ornament, which is quite often depicted adorning the chests of various Mayan priests and rulers on numerous stelae and bas-reliefs. Ordinarily, this pectoral adornment is simply a sun disk, often bearing an anthropomorphic sun god face, and usually having a fringed tail. The fringed tail, of course, being inspired by the polar plumes of the sun's corona. Some examples of the sun god pectoral, however, have wing-like extensions spreading out on either side that give them the appearance which is distinctly similar to the Egyptian and Mesopotamian winged sun symbols. And I think we're out of time here. Yeah, we just have a few seconds left, so we'll end the narration there, and we'll continue on in another fresh video clip after this one.